Hey, everybody, welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Kirby. And of course, we're trying to get guests on this show to help that small and medium-sized nonprofit do great big things. And one of the barriers to doing great big things is your board. And you know that they are, right? They are either disengaged or too engaged, or maybe you've got to drag them around. It's kind of like herding cats. And in a sense, it's probably like herding disinterested cats. If you know what a cat is and is disinterested, there's no way you can get them coming around, right? And that's frustrating. And of course, you want to do the things that you're great at, which is building rapport with your donors and fundraising and making impact in your community. When all you're thinking about is, oh my God, I got another board report and I have another meeting to do, and oh my God, I can't wait to not have that happen. We're going to solve your problem today because we brought with you an amazing guest. Jeb Banner, who is the CEO and founder of Boardable, has joined us today. Jeb, thank you so much for being a guest on the official Do Good Better podcast.
Thanks, Patrick. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk about this.
I'm really excited to talk about this. This is a topic of conversation I think that nonprofits of any size deal with, which is board engagement. But before we dive into that, because people are kind of scrolling through, iTunes, or they're looking at YouTube or Facebook, and there's like, Boardable, I've heard of this, but I don't really know anything about Jeb Banner. I need to know about him. Kind of give a 5,000-foot view of where you kind of started and how this became a thing that you founded and are a part of.
Yeah, so Boardable is just real quick software for nonprofit boards. So focused really around the board meeting in particular. And it came out of my experience as an entrepreneur and as a founder of nonprofits. So I had started a number of businesses. And then along the way, I'd started a couple nonprofits and served as the board chair for both those nonprofits. The first one served the music community here in Indiana called Musical Family Tree. The second one was called the Speakeasy and served the entrepreneurial community. It was actually the first co-working space here in Indiana back in 2011. And my experience of being the chair, I didn't know how to be a chair. Nobody told me how to be a chair. I just did it. It's kind of like, well, I run a business, I'll chair a board. It's very different, but I didn't know that. B, I didn't have any tools. I was using email. I was using attachments, Dropbox, doodle polls, calendar invites. And at one point at the Speakeasy as a chair, I couldn't find the bylaws. And I was like, this is a problem. I should know where the bylaws are. But an early board member had rolled off and the bylaws had rolled off with them. And I realized that all of the communication of the board was flowing through our inboxes. And I couldn't find anything. I spent so much time searching my inbox, using different keywords, trying to find attachments, trying to find something. Eventually, setting up a Google Drive, and then permission issues came into play, and who had access to what folders, and then somebody rolls off, then you change it. It's just a mess, right? So out of that came the idea for Boardable. At the same time, the United Way of Central Indiana, who I now am on the board of and have a great experience working with them, seeing sort of like the big organizational side versus the startup nonprofit world, said, hey, we need a board portal. And so all the light bulbs went off and we said, well, I think it's time for us to build a product. So that was in 2016, and then early 17, we started to actually sell Boardable out in the world, and had some customers that weren't friends, which is always scary and exciting. And it quickly took off, and I was running a creative agency at the time. And so by the end of 2017, I left Smallbox, that agency, to go full time with Boardable. And then we've grown quite a bit since then, taken on funding. We're at now over 1,000 customers. We're in 25 countries. And we are just dedicated to helping those nonprofits around the world have better board meetings, better board engagement, better board meetings, and then increasing the impact of that nonprofit. Because when the board's healthy, the nonprofit's healthy. That's my working theory, and so far it's proven pretty true.
I think there's nothing worse than dreading a board meeting, not knowing what's expected of you, or whether they've read the materials, or you've laid out a lot of work. I think the frustration is, all right, I'm going to do all these materials, I'm going to have all these things ready, and then nobody's going to read them until 5 minutes before the meeting starts, and or they're claimed they'll never have gotten them or whatever. And I've done all this work for zero conversation about what I presented forward, and now we're off on a tangent somewhere else, and then now it's off the rails, and everything I did was all for naught. And I think that is a frustration of every person who either steps into the board, or members of the board who are brand new, who don't get onboarded, right? And that's a major issue, because there isn't a a regular course or things that you take where you're just kind of thrown to the wolves.
Yeah.
So this is such a wonderful conversation to start. So from a small and medium sized nonprofit, I think the larger nonprofits usually have somebody, they usually hire out a consultant to come in and kind of manage some of those things. But I'm talking about those small and medium sized, maybe the startups really find it 3, 4, 5 years. Let's start at the start. What type of person should be on a board while you get started? And for those of you who are listening, Jeb's being very humble. He started 2 nonprofits, and he's a glutton for punishment because he's starting a 3rd one. So this is how crazy involved and in love with the nonprofit industry that he is. But what do you look for? Because I think that's a question that a lot of nonprofits are, well, who do I get on my board? And wondering if your experience, what's a great type of person to join your board to get you started and kind of ramped up?
Yeah, in each of those 3 experiences, including the Indiana Independent Venue Alliance that spun up during the pandemic in response to music venues really just being completely put to the edge of their existence with all their revenue being eradicated, unfortunately. They were different boards. They needed to be different boards. With the Speakeasy, it was very much a roll your sleeves. Let's go in and get this done. We were really a working board. With the IIVA, the Venue Alliance, it was much more an advisory board, a governing board to help funnel funding to venues. So a different function. A fundraising component for sure, but we needed to have people that were not venue owners decide how this funding that was coming in from different places, including state and federal and city, go to the venues without having the venue owners have conflict of interest. So that was a different function, but it was an important one to play. Then with Musical Family Tree, it was more about building community. So it was about getting the musicians of the community involved in having a voice and advocacy for what's the music scene, which really was not being represented. So of those, I think the Speakeasy is probably the most common for a startup board, where you're rolling up your sleeves, you're showing up, you're painting, you're painting the rooms, you're fundraising, everybody is hands-on, and you're in a sprint to get up and running, get that 501c3 certification done back to you as fast as you can. So that's a very typical dynamic, I think, for a startup board, is a working board. And I think that's the right way to run a board at that stage.
Well, when's the leap to make sure that you've got people in positions that can help you grow? Is there a self-awareness piece? Is it after 2 or 3 years? And then how do you have that conversation internally to either to add or subtract or sort of have people move on and off of the boards? Because what you don't want is that 39-year-old or that 39-year lifer who's been there since the beginning, that is just everything is, well, that's not how we did it when we founded it. You're like, oh God, this guy again. So how do you know when to change? And then what's that conversation like internally from a board standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's so critical to plan for your obsolescence as a board member. As a founder in particular, I'm no longer on Musical Family Tree or Speakeasy boards, and none of the founders are. The Speakeasy. There was a number of founders, I think 4 with that. So, I think it's very important to recognize the difference between a board and a business. As a nonprofit, there's no ownership there, and that's ownership both on a literal and figurative sense. And I think too often you see founder syndrome happen with nonprofit boards. And with nonprofits themselves, with the executive directors often being these very charismatic founders, or the board chair, the founding board chair, being very charismatic and really building the board around their personality and their influence, their connections. And that's okay for the startup board. You call your friends, you ask them to roll up your sleeves to get things going, but you got to set the table right there with, hey, this is not a lifelong position. You're doing a 2, maybe 3-year tour of duty. As a board member, and our job is to diversify this board, as to go out from this to be more of a governing board as we reach that cruising altitude, so we have specialists coming in versus generalists. So when you start with a nonprofit or a business for that matter, you generally want generalists who can just roll up their sleeves and do 5 different things, wear different hats. As you grow and the board grows, you want more specialists. So you want somebody who just is really good at they're a lawyer who goes deep into understanding how to navigate nonprofit issues. You have a marketer who understands fundraising, right? You have all these different specialized roles where they can come in and really augment your staff, which at this point hopefully exists and
Yep.
isn't just one part-time resource, which is
Right.
usually how a nonprofit starts. So I think you go from that generalist to specialist with the board, and you make sure you instill from day one, this is not a lifelong commitment, you're gonna be looking to get replaced here, and you should feel honored that you've started something that continues without your involvement.
I think one of the issues that I think comes along after a couple of years too, or relatively immediate if some of the new members, is disengagement.
Yeah,
Um, uh, there's probably a million reasons why board members are disengaged. But from your experience, and you talk with hundreds, if not thousands, of nonprofits every day, kind of coming in through Boardable, is what are you finding the more common reason for, or common trait of a board member who's disengaged?
yeah. I sometimes compare joining a board to walking into a movie theater. Remember we went to movie theaters and you were late and
Yeah.
you come in about 20, 30 minutes late and you're like, what is going on? Why is this guy angry?
Hmm.
What's the plot here? A lot of times joining a board feels that way for a new board member. They come in, they don't have the context. They're confused. They don't understand that there's politics in a board like everything else. They don't understand that the culture and the dynamics, and that's a really big hurdle for them because they spend a lot of time trying to navigate. And if they're meeting quarterly, it's really hard to navigate. It may take them a year to get their head around what's going on that board. So getting them up to speed more quickly is very important. They got to understand the narrative of that board. The startup founders, they are the narrative, they're the story. They have to hand that story off, and they have to make it easy for people to come in and join that narrative.
Hmm.
Too often, it's not that case.
Yeah.
Now, ongoing, I think there's another dynamic to engagement. So I think that's sort of like the day one problem.
Hmm.
But the big problems that we see, people are not prepared for board meetings. And a big part of that is materials are being sent out last minute. They're often overwhelming in the amount of material that they're being sent.
Hmm.
They're being given these packets that are 50, 60, 100 pages long, and then being asked to consume them in a matter of a few days uh, against a very busy schedule. Um, and they don't know which parts of that packet are most important to focus on. Specific, if they're specialized, specifically the things they know best. So that board preparation is a real problem. Getting things out to people sooner helps a lot, and being more focused with what you're sending out is important as well. In our product, we've built an agenda builder that allows you to put all this content in, organize it, update it, have it accessible to your board, and change it, and then it outputs a board packet that they can then look at as one long document or as individuals as well, individual documents as well. So that helps get it out there sooner.
Hmm.
They're not waiting to hit the print button, if you will.
Right.
um, the other problem that we see a lot with boards, and this has been exacerbated a little bit during the pandemic, is meeting engagement.
Yeah.
Attendance, we have all the analytics because we have all these boards using Boardable. Attendance has gone up. Meetings have gone up. We saw a 50% increase in meetings
Mhm.
with our customers in Q2 over Q1 of last year. So
Interesting.
as the pandemic set in, the cadence of meetings picked up. But what we're hearing is that people are just tuned out. They turn off their video. They're not engaged. There's less conversation. And I think that a big problem we're having here, I think a lot about synchronous versus asynchronous work. Like when you're in a boardroom, often they'll break you out into a bigger group. They'll break you out into smaller groups to do some work together, and it's very engaging. Then you report out to the full board. It's really hard to do that on Zoom. You can do breakout rooms and things like that, but generally there's not a lot of opportunities with video conferencing for asynchronous work. And so that's something that we're thinking about with our product, as we build it further and further. How do you allow people to collaborate and work in an asynchronous way? So it's not just everybody talk, one person talks, one person talks, one person talks, presentation, presentation, presentation. How do you get so that you're actually getting the board engaged and rolling up their sleeves during the meeting? So the meeting is work that they enjoy, they're engaged with, because most meetings are presentations.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real problem because people just get tuned out
Mhm.
and they don't feel like they're being engaged.
Yeah.
So
Well, I also think that they're presentations about things that they're already reading rather than sort of a visionary step forward on what we could do, right? Because
right.
they're trapped in this mundane sort of like, well, I got to do this process that's been archaic for the last decade, rather than bringing in somebody who's got an outside perspective who can give maybe a presentation on a topic by which the board could be involved in futuristically. So
Yeah.
they can start visioning, they can cast a vision together rather than going over what's red and green and yellow in a budget. And all they're concentrating is on the red, and they're just getting amped up for the questions they're going to ask. Why is this red? Rather than reading the explanation. Like it's this like mess of a thing. And what you said earlier before we went live was the digital duct tape board.
Mhm.
And I'd love you to kind of explain this because it's one of the best phrases that I've heard in a long time. I'm here now. I say this live on this podcast. I am stealing this. I will give credit, Jeb, to the fact that I will give a credit where credit is due. But the idea of digital duct tape, of using a number of different products or a number of different things to herd your board together for
Mhm.
communication, is a real issue.
Yeah.
When did you kind of come up with that, and where was that sort of epiphany to go like this? There's got to be some sort of better way to do this.
Yeah, that really just kind of came out of my mouth one day, to be honest. I grew up using duct tape for everything. I once built a go-kart out of duct tape. It was just anytime that I couldn't figure out how to get something to stick to something else, I used duct tape. And I'd started to look at how I was running my boards and how I was experiencing them. And I was like, this is the equivalent of digital duct tape. You've got all of these tools that are not purpose built for managing a board being used off label, as you will, to like tape together a board experience that is not coherent whatsoever. And it's very, very hard to point out where the experience is. Like, is it in the inbox? Well, it's sort of there. Is it in the calendar? Well, it's sort of there. And I realized there was a need to just have that one place that you could go to where everything, your documents, your meetings, your discussions, your contact list, your committees, everything was in one place. And that would then feed out to the digital duct tape. We accept the world of the digital duct tape. We know email is going to exist. We know that you're going to have text messages and everything else. So we're more about meeting people where they're at in that world and making sure it all centralizes in one place. Because again, when we want someone joining the board, we want them to understand the plot. We want them to walk in and know what's going on. And with a digital duct tape solution, it's not that. It's a mess. And it's a real mess to control permissions and access.
Mm-hmm.
As people move, so for instance, if you're on the board and you move to the executive committee, in Boardable, it's a click and all your access changes. In the digital duct tape world, you're going into multiple systems and changing things, and things always get messy there, really, really messy. So that really just came out of my mouth one day when I was explaining it to somebody, and they said, "Oh, that's just like you. That's good." And so we started leaning into that.
I like that. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was having somebody, kind of come into the movie theater and go, "What the hell's going on?
Yeah.
I'm so lost and confused." Imagine doing that watching Tenet, by the way. If you watch
Oh my
Tenet, have you
goodness.
ever seen the movie Tenet? I watched the whole thing and I didn't know what was going on.
I watched a half an hour of it with my wife, and we both were like, we cannot continue this. This is
Yes, it is too high above me.
I'm
And I
impressed
think,
you made it through.
yeah, I think if you can watch Tenet, you can get through any board meeting, and at any point. That's my basis for everything. But one of the things that I think new board members are often sort of confused with is, and you kind of alluded to this too, are the factions within the board, right?
Mhm.
Because it's the one person who's going to talk to that new member more than others. They will eventually then align with that other person because nobody else has reached out. And I think there is another reason from this engagement piece, and that you how do you not force, because I think you can't force board members to like everybody or associate with it, but in this digital Zoom, Brady Bunch box Zoom of death thing that we are in all the time, how have you found through Boardable itself or through your experience with boards is engaging those new individuals so that they don't get fractioned or factioned out with some aligning within a board that then has these fights that, well, no, I don't believe in this, or this is going to be the thing that this is the hill we're going to die on fighting over this budget piece. How do you do that in a world where we can't sit down and hug and high five and have, cocktails afterwards to get to know the person on a more personal level?
Yeah, a few thoughts on that. One, from my business, we're at about 40 people now, and we've grown. We've doubled our size during the pandemic, and a lot of the hires are remote. So we're struggling with this as a team.
Right.
And so we've started we use Slack. Slack is like kind of more of a day-to-day communication tool for those who don't know it, and it randomly matches employees and schedules meetings for them so that they're connecting. So that's one thought. Is just like, how do you just basically take, sort of act as the assistant, and just go ahead and connect to your board members. I found, in terms of my board service and the role I have, phone calls are great. It's old-fashioned. People actually love a phone call right now, not staring at a screen. They can take the dog on a walk.
Yes.
I think, encouraging your board members to connect that way and just have an old-fashioned phone conversation is a really good idea. I think in the Zoom experience, though, the third point is that, doing small breakout groups, and we did quite a few with United Way around race and equity. Recently read books together, had conversations around it, talked about how we could make changes in our life and changes in the organization as we try to become more focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That really connected me more on a human level with people. So it was the piece that I think really worked was having facilitators. Outside facilitators come in and drive those conversations in a way that made people feel safe to speak up and have those conversations that are hard to talk about.
Yeah. I love the fact that you took time as board members to talk about things like equity, inclusion, and that kind of thing. And I think when people imagine themselves in their board having like conversations that this may not be directly correlated to your programming and services, but when you are organized as a board and you have your, proverbial poop in a group, and you don't have to worry about scrambling to get all of your stuff done, because now you can take the time to grow as a leadership team, so that you can take time and think about some of these bigger picture issues on how your organization can evolve and sort of make an impact in the community. You have to get everything on the foundational side done, right? You can't be scrambling around. You can't be sort of last minute. You can't be sort of worried about who's showing up or who's read what or who's understanding these kind of things. And that's, I think, the genius of Boardable, is that you allow the freedom of time to take on issues that you normally wouldn't at a board level, so that you can concentrate on those big, hairy, audacious goals that you want to project, that you want your organization to go to, that you'll never be able to get if you are so worried about what page goes where and what thing goes where and who read what. And then that I think is the real genius behind this, is you get rid of that worry so you can concentrate on the big things in the first place.
Yeah, that's right. I strongly believe in consent agendas, of getting things out there, getting people educated. We're going to be moving forward with some things where you're going to have visibility as administrator into how prepared your board is for a meeting, whether they're ready to have those big conversations. Then, of course, the discussion functionality in the product allows you to continue conversations outside of the meeting. So again, thinking about that asynchronous side of things as well. So yeah, that's a big part of what we're trying to solve for, Patrick.
Outstanding. Well, all right. So I'm a board member. I've been a board member for a while, kind of crank-tankerous. I got this new fancy product that somebody's trying to pitch on me called Boardable. I don't like it. I like to have my things printed out, and I like to drink coffee this way, right? Sell me as a crank-tankerous board member who doesn't like change on why Boardable is a good fit for me. Because I think when people are listening, they're like, okay, this sounds like a great product. And we'll dive into some of the details here in a bit. We'll link out everything so you can take a spin around, right? But I think initially people go to, well, my board's never going to buy this. So I know you've probably talked to, again, hundreds of executive directors and leaders to kind of to convert to this. What's that response to overcome that big, I'm not interested in changing for the good of the order?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Some of our biggest fans are actually in their 70s and 80s,
Love it.
and that's been a nice surprise for us. First off, we understand that change is hard. We know that's the case.
Mhm.
We try to make it as easy as possible for your board members to get into Boardable.
Mhm.
So we even have something called login without password, which is a very secure way of doing this, where all they have to know is their email address, and then they'll get a link that takes them right into the Boardable account and into the board meeting. So we really try to remove all the barriers of access that so often happen, like with Microsoft Teams and these other
Right.
systems people use that are great tools internally, but really hard to bring outsiders into.
Mhm.
So we really try to make it easy to get into the product. We have a mobile app as well. We're about to launch a desktop app as well, so they can just have that button to push right there on their computer. They already have iPad and iPhone and Android.
Mhm.
So really, access is a big deal. The second thing is it's really simple. This is what we hear time and time again. This is something where you go, you see exactly what you need to do, you push a button, and it's all right there. Board members do not need training on Boardable. Administrators will provide training, but
Yeah.
we have over 30,000 board members using Boardable of all ages, from 20s into their 90s. They do not need training on Boardable. It's very easy to use. But the third thing I want to emphasize is we bring Boardable to them.
Mm.
So we integrate with calendars, just with the push of a button, their calendar will be integrated. We bring it into their inbox. If they don't want to integrate their calendar, they'll see that meeting invite right there in their email. If your board member uses email, they can use Boardable. And that's really the threshold here. We get that not everybody's going to go in there and do all the fancy stuff that the administrators are more likely to do.
Sure.
But the administrators are really kind of creating the experience for the board member to consume, if you will. And we make it very easy for the board member to have that experience.
I love that. Yeah, I think that is the ease by which people can use it, and they're not frustrated, so they don't throw it off, and they just don't use it as an excuse to be angry about something else. And I think that eliminating that worry then begins the conversation of how you can simplify. And again, and I would even stress, if you're considering something like this, and you're considering a Boardable, imagine all the time you're going to have and save, so that you yourself, as an executive director, or somebody who's putting these pieces together, don't have to do 1.5 million things that drive you nuts, so that you can actually look forward to a board meeting, so you can address some of these cool things that you've always wanted to envision in the first place. And I think if we can eliminate the archaic and sort of things that we just never like about the nonprofit work, because it was archaic work. If we can
Yeah.
eliminate that, now we get back to the things that got us excited about joining, got excited about working at a nonprofit. And that becomes a more enjoyable work, which means that you'll do better work, which means you're going to make better impact
Yeah.
across the board, which is awesome. So walk me through how I get onboarded and how I go and get myself into the family of Boardable. How do I do this?
Absolutely. It's very easy. You go to boardable.com, you click start a free trial. There's no credit card, no obligation. You have 14 days to use it. And then it's the full product. You go in, you can add meetings, add other users, build out committees, upload documents, start discussions. You can have voting in there, assign tasks, and then use the product. We have demo training that is available, so you can get a personalized demo sign up as well. That's available through the website. We have webinars you can attend. And then if you want to work with us, it's pretty cheap. It starts at $49 a month. So really, we have a grassroots plan that's specifically built for those small, medium nonprofits that are so dear to me, having been involved with so many of them, that are very, understandably price sensitive. We want to be something where one of the board members can afford to pay for it themselves. So that's something that's available, and it's something we just launched recently. And then the plans go up from there, and then we have folks that are paying around around 1,000 a month for a large installation with many instances of Boardable under one account. So that's all you got to do. It's very simple and self-service. If you don't like it, you can cancel it, and we'll cry a couple tears, but life goes on. But
I love it.
we don't have a lot of cancellations. Our customers love the product.
I love it. Well, again, it's been a pleasure chatting with you because again, anybody bringing simplicity into something that a lot of people think is complex or overwhelming, and if you can just eliminate that overwhelming feeling that you don't have to have that the case of the Mondays on a Wednesday night, right, where you're like, or the case of the Sundays where you're like, oh God, I just dread doing whatever, right? Don't dread a board meeting. It shouldn't be a dreadful experience. It should be a joyful experience, talking about all your wins and the things you could do in your community. And this is such a great thing to chat about, to acknowledge that everybody goes through this kind of stuff and that there's a solution there for you, and that's wonderfully priced and it's available to everybody, which is awesome. And again, helping those small and medium-sized nonprofits do the great big things they were supposed to do. Jeb, we're going to put all the links. How do we get a hold of you? That's what we want to do. How do we get a hold of you, and where do we go to ask questions?
Sure. Jeb, Jeb at boardable.com, or you can Google my name, Jeb Banner, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the other places. Obviously, through Boardable website, we have a contact form. But my email is jeb at boardable.com, and I'm always happy to help out and send you to someone on our team that can be of assistance with something that I can't help with. I'm not very good at demos as I was in the early days, but we got a great team, and they'll take care of you for sure. A lot of people that used to be in the nonprofit world, we've intentionally hired a lot of nonprofit folks as we've grown.
That's fantastic. We'll drop all those links in the show notes. Jeb, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to chat with you today. Thanks so much for what you do to make this life in the nonprofit world a little bit easier and a little more awesome. So I appreciate you being a guest on the official Do Good Better podcast.
Thank you, Patrick. It was a pleasure.
Have a great one. We'll talk to you soon.